Hello, I'm professional attorney and very much amateur musician Scott Lesowitz, and in this video I will be talking about how a music expert paid roughly $337,000 helped lead to likely the worst finding of copyright infringement in a music case ever. I'm talking about the controversial case that found that Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams committed copyright infringement via their song Blurred Lines against Marvin Gaye's song Gotta Give It Up. After the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed the finding of infringement in a 2-to-1 decision over a fiery dissent, the Gaye family was ultimately awarded roughly $5 million. To be upfront here about my views of the case, if it's not already clear enough yet, I think it was a horrible decision. I think the judge never should have even allowed this to get to the jury. He should have thrown it out. No, I think there are similarities between the songs. I think that Blurred Lines has the same style and same vibe as Gotta Give It Up. And I even think that Pharrell and Robin Thicke intentionally created a song with the same style and vibe as Gotta Give It Up. However, one cannot copyright a style of music or a vibe. All right, before we even get to part one though, let's take a listen and compare the parts of the songs that the music experts largely focused on. An important principle for the Blurred Lines case is that there are times when a sufficiently original arrangement of otherwise unoriginal elements can qualify for copyright protection. However, as the later Ninth Circuit opinion addressing the Stairway to Heaven copyright case emphasized, under established law dating back way before the Blurred Lines case, a musicologist cannot just come in and point to random similarities scattered throughout the relevant portions of the works and label them an original arrangement. And I agree with the commentators who argue that in the Blurred Lines case, the courts essentially allowed the plaintiff's music expert to point to a bunch of seemingly random similarities in the songs and then claim they amounted to the copying of an original arrangement. All right, now on to part two, where I will break down the expert opinions of the Gaye family's music expert, the primary expert, Judith Fennell. So in a copyright infringement case like this, where the plaintiff is alleging that the defendant's song is too similar to the plaintiff's song, basically almost always both sides are going to need a music expert. Sometimes a musician can act as his or her own expert, as was seen recently in the Ed Sheeran trial versus his lawsuit involving a Marvin Gaye song. But here, as often is the case, both sides went out and hired experts. Now, the most important thing about an expert is making sure that the expert is allowed to testify. Judges are supposed to throw out and disallow expert testimony that has unreliable methods and unreliable opinions. And the challenges to whether an expert should be able to testify usually occurs before trial one way or another. So I'm going to focus largely on Judith Fennell's initial report that she wrote for the case, and the jury did not see this report. However, it provided a blueprint for her testimony, essentially a trial. The attorney would ask questions to essentially elicit the same opinions that are in the report. And the report included a lot of illustrations that I'm going to show you, and those were turned into exhibits that were shown to the jury at trial. And in Ms. Fennell's report, she found that there were 8 sets of similarities between the songs. Now, you gotta be thinking, wow, if there's 8 sets of similarities, obviously there has to be infringement. I mean, 8, that's more notes than there are in the major scale. And while I like to think that quality wins out over quantity, unfortunately, in this case, it looks like quantity won out over quality. The first set of similarities from Ms. Fennell's report has to do with the signature phrases of the 2 songs. So here's the illustration that is from her report. Okay, so in all of these illustrations, Blurred Lines is transposed so that both songs are in A major. The numbers in the illustration are the scale degrees of the notes. So the second scale degree would be B, third would be C sharp, fourth would be D, so on. And looking at this illustration, you can see there are not that many notes in common, and the movement between notes is not even the same. Nonetheless, Miss Fennell identified similarities, focusing on 4 of them just as to these signature phrases. So first she says that they both repeat their starting tone several times. That's just plain wrong. Several means more than 2, and transposed to A major, blurred lines signature phrase starts with 2 C sharps before descending to a C natural, so it's only 2 tones repeated. And then second, she says they both contain the scale degree sequence 5-6-1 followed by 1-5, but Gotta Give It Up actually goes 5-6-1-2 and then 1-5-6. But there's also the separate issue that 1-5-6 are common notes to move between. Okay, so then third, she says that both songs' signature phrases contain identical rhythms for the first 6 notes, but the rhythms are simply an 8th note rest followed by 6 8 notes. So who really cares about this? And fourth, they both end where a word is elongated. This is common. Anytime you sing happy birthday to somebody with a 1-syllable name, you do this, like happy birthday to Dan. So maybe the writer of the happy birthday song should have sued Marvin Gaye. Okay, so you might be thinking at this point, all right, so that first set of similarities, that was not impressive at all, but that still leaves 7 sets of similarities. That's 1 for each day of the week. So come on, we still got infringement, right? So her second set of similarities is that both hooks have 4 notes and 3 of the notes are the same. Yes, we're looking at a sequence of 4 notes and only 3 of the 4 are the same. And for those 3 same notes, 2 of them are the root note and they're rhythmically different. So her third set of similarities is that the backup vocals to the hooks both add in the 3rd and 5th scale degrees. That might seem like a big deal, I don't know, maybe, except that when you look at blurred lines, the backup vocals are the 1st, 3rd, and 5th. That's pretty unremarkable when you remember that the 1st, 3rd, and 5th are the notes of a major chord. Okay, so you might be thinking now, all right, so these are all unimpressive so far, but we still have 5 similarities left. That's still 1 for each work day of the week. And really, we're about business here, so that's good enough, right? So for the 4th and 5th set of similarities, she's looking at the backup hooks, which she says both use 2 half steps involving a sharpened note that's not technically part of the scale. And while they both have a sharpened out of scale note, the 4 note patterns simply move chromatically from the major 3rd down to the minor 3rd and back up to the major 3rd. And then the 6th set of similarities are the baseline introductions. So Miss Fennell, even she acknowledges that the bass introductions are different, but she says they are similar in their scale degrees and rhythms and sound very similar. When you look at her illustration here, while there might be syncopation and some similarities, you can see that there are plenty of differences, to say the least, both in terms of the notes used, the rhythm, and the number of notes. And of course, Marvin Gaye did not invent syncopation, and he does not own it. And Miss Fennell also points out that each of them have a C part where they descend down from 5 to 1, but they get from 5 to 1 in different ways. And come on, that's very common to go from 5 to 1. And for the 7th set of similarities, she focuses on largely the harmonies of the keyboard parts. And the big thing here, to just kind of cut through all the BS, is that Blurred Lines is a 2-chord song. But that said, Gotta Give It Up did not just have 2 chords, it had many more chords, and they were all 7 chords. She also noted that the keyboard parts in both songs emphasize the offbeat, but again, that's just not something that Marvin Gaye invented. No disrespect to the guy, terrific musician, tremendously innovative. And like I said, the other side, the defendants, had their own musical expert who issued a report where she says, goes through Miss Fennell's report and explains why it's garbage. And she also lays out plenty of examples of other songs. Okay, so that leads me on to the third part of the video, which I think is going to be the fun part. So let's look at the awful testimony of Robin Thicke. So I imagine that Judith Fennell's expert testimony largely went over the heads of the jurors, and I think the big thing that decided the outcome here was the credibility and likability of Robin Thicke. That said, without Judith Fennell's report surviving and getting in and the judge allowing it, then the case would have been thrown out. They could not have gotten through trial without a music expert. And also, I think it did help give the jury reassurance that, okay, well, we don't like Robin Thicke, and we also have this lady with impressive sounding credentials telling us that there's all these similarities. So let's talk about how the son of America's favorite Canadian TV dad came off so badly and so unlikable. So first, Thicke testified that he and Pharrell never spoke about Gotta Give It Up at all when they were coming up with Blurred Lines. Unfortunately for Robin Thicke, there were a number of interviews that he had given where he said that he told Pharrell, hey, let's make a song where we have that same style and groove, just like Gotta Give It Up, and that's one of my favorite songs. Now you might think Robin Thicke is an entertainer, this guy's gonna be smooth, he's gonna have a really good way to explain this to the judge and the jury in his testimony. Well, no. So Thicke testified, when I give interviews, I tell whatever I want to say to help sell records. And as another example of a problem for them, Robin Thicke claimed to be a co-author, but then that's not what he testified to. He testified that he had nothing to do with the actual writing of the song, but had been confused because, as he testified, I was drunk and high, and I don't recall how the session went.